Media recognition from Bloomberg, Reuters, recycling trade publications. Patented process for 100% recovery of critical metals, including cobalt, lithium, nickel, manganese, aluminum. American Manganese is focused on recycling lithium-ion batteries for electric vehicles. American Manganese trades on the TSX Venture, AMY, the US, AMYZF, and Frankfurt 2AM. For more information, visit AmericanManganeseInc.com or phone me, Larry Ray, at 778-574-4444.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Mark Friesen. He's running this federal election for the People's Party of Canada. He's the grizzly patriot fighting for freedom in Canada. Online, you can find him at ffcs.info. You can follow him on Twitter at MarkFriesen08. And on Facebook at Mark Friesen PPC. Welcome back to the Goddard Report, Mark.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me on again.
Mark, first of all, can you tell us where you're running and how your campaign's going?
Yeah, so I'm in Saskatoon, the riding of Saskatoon-Grasswood. It's one of three ridings in Saskatoon. It's sort of the southeast side of town. And I can tell you the campaign this time around, compared to the campaign in 2019 is exponentially different. I have, incredible amount of support, lots of volunteers, lots of donations. There's a lot of people that are very upset with the, sign of the times right now and the tyranny, frankly, that we're being faced with and having to withstand. People have had enough. It really is, starting to become an election of freedom over tyranny. And that's what I'm hearing from a lot of people.
Some of your election signs have been destroyed or vandalized. Is this a sign you're gaining prominence in your riding?
Yeah, I think it's an indicator. I think, our opposition obviously is very concerned, and they sense the support that we're getting. So yeah, it's definitely a strong indicator. As almost as soon as we put them up, it seems within a day they're vandalized again. And they're using box cutters to just slice them in half. So we have to replace them, as quick as we can. So it's kind of a cat and mouse game, but we'll see if it continues on. I have plenty to replace with, so it's one of those things. I think it's important that people know that it's actually a crime to either deface, steal, or otherwise damage electoral signs. So I think it's important that people know that. And, if you do get caught, we won't be shy to, make sure that you're prosecuted.
You're doing 2-minute drills during this election campaign. What are they, and where can people see them?
Yeah, so it's, I'm used to doing live shows, sort of long form discussion. I just don't have the time for that, in this campaign, so I've reduced them down to 2-minute drills, I call them. And really, it's just quick 2-minute segments where I try to educate the voter as to what's happening, why it's happening, why are all these things going on. And, it seems to be catching on. People like really quick, short videos that are concise and understandable and relatable. So, I run those through my Twitter, through Facebook, and then I upload them to my Rumble account.
How many candidates does the People's Party have running this election?
Well, we had 331 out of 338 that were approved by the party. Now, I don't know if that number is going to change because, of course, we all as candidates have to go through the election process, and part of that process to getting confirmed as a candidate is you need 100 signatures from people within your riding. So I'm going to assume that everybody got those signatures, and we'll have 331 candidates running in this election.
Is freedom versus totalitarianism the real issue of this election?
I really believe that's what it's boiling down to. And I'm not surprised, and it's probably something that we probably could have called a while ago, that this is where it was headed. But, the globalist agenda, sustainable development, the Great Reset, World Economic Forum, the UN, you name it, they have an agenda they want to fulfill, and in order to do that, they're going to need to be tyrannical. And so, they're using COVID, of course, to forward that and to condition and socially engineer the masses. So really, I find it somewhat still a little bit shocking even that Trudeau would call an election as this is happening, especially with the vaccine passports, that he would put that question on the ballot, because that's essentially what he's done. In fact, it was in his own words that he said, you'll have to, vote your way out of tyranny. He basically admitted that he's tyrannical, and, if people like it, then vote for us. If they don't, then they can vote for freedom. So, using his words, it truly is, boiled down to that.
Are the people you're talking to telling you they didn't see a reason for an election to be called right now? That it seemed like he was trying to exploit what happens to be kind of a weakness in the system?
Yeah, I think, to be honest with you, I knowing Trudeau, it probably has a lot to do with arrogance and hubris. I think they had a different view of things. And, I don't think they really, are on the ground and connected to real Canadians and what real Canadians want and demand. So I think he misread things, and I think it will end up backfiring on him.
With talk of widespread election fraud in the U.S. and a push on for mail-in ballots in Canada, is election fraud here a concern?
Not as much as it is, of course, in America. The federal election in Canada, we don't use voting machines, so we want to make that, clear to everybody that's listening. They are not used in the federal election. The ballots are still hand counted at the ballot station, and that's why it's extremely important. We're telling all of our supporters, make sure that they volunteer to be scrutineers so they can watch the counting to make sure everything in the process is done properly and everyone's doing what they're supposed to be doing. Now, of course, with mail-in, that may add a little bit more fear and ability to manipulate the outcome. But again, I just spoke with our returning officer and his team at the office here in Saskatoon-Grasswood, and he explained to us that with the mail-in, they are mailed to the ballot station. They're not sent to Ottawa to some central area where they're counted by a machine. They're sent to each ballot station, electoral office, and they're counted by hand. And again, we can have scrutineers present when we count those ballots. So people need to know that, because there is there is a bit of an attitude out there that what's the point? It's just going to be rigged, or it's just going to be, fraudulent. I think a lot of that falls on us. We have to take responsibility, and we have to go and make sure that the process is done properly. So, not as much fear as I think is warranted if we're comparing it to the Americans and how they ran their election. Absolutely. We need an army of scrutineers at every ballot station.
People, as you know, can be set in their ways. They've always voted for the same establishment party and feel comfortable voting for that establishment party. What can you and the PPC do to win those people over?
Well, I think, obviously the COVID mandates, the lockdowns, the mandatory masking and social distancing, and the destruction of our economy, the destruction of small business, refer to them as the uni party, because they're all the same. They've all committed to the globalist agenda. They've all committed, with very little differences to the mandates and restrictions and the Vax Pass and these sorts of things. So there's really very little that distinguishes each of the establishment parties from each other. The PPC is very distinct from the establishment parties. We offer, obviously, freedom of choice, liberty, and I think there's a set of values that Canadians share across the board. And once people recognize that and start to think about their values, they'll understand that there is a core set of values that we share, and that's freedom, liberty, sovereignty, justice, equality, prosperity, and truth. And I think once people consider that and recognize those values and understand that those values are under attack, that we need to unite under those values, and it's the PPC that represents those values and will defend and protect those values. Our establishment parties have shown that they absolutely do not protect and will not defend those values. So we are, as I said, very distinct in what we are and what we represent.
Justin Trudeau's now getting angry crowds wherever he goes. What's that a sign of?
Well, it's a sign of a lot of anger across the country, and it's a sign of how out of touch our elite political class is from the regular Canadian. Justin Trudeau was interviewed the other day and asked how he responded to how he's been treated, and he didn't seem to understand. He couldn't comprehend that people would be angry. People that have lost their businesses, they've lost their jobs, they've lost their livelihood. In some cases, they've lost loved ones to the vaccine, for example. So there is a lot of anger. There's a lot of unrest throughout the country, and it just shows either he's completely and utterly out of touch, or he understands exactly what he's doing and he's just putting on a facade. It's one or the other.
Trudeau is not running on his track record of the last 6 years. Is that something shocking for an incumbent?
Yeah, it's a little bit interesting. I think what you see is what you get, and I think they are all in. And when I say they, I mean the globalists and the globalist agenda, Trudeau and his cohorts, and the CPC, O'Toole and his cohorts. I think they've all basically pushed all in, and they're either going to get elected based on that agenda, based on what they've told Canadians they're going to do, or they're not. And I think it's really going to boil down to that. So it is what it is. I see it for exactly what it is.
COVID-19 and vaccine passports are a hot button issue in this election, encompassing fear and mass psychosis. Where does the PPC stand on COVID-19 and vaccine passports?
Yeah, we're fundamentally against vaccine passports, and it's a little bit insane to me, to be honest with you, that we're even having this discussion. You go from all levels of government, you go from all levels of legislation, right up to international human rights, the Nuremberg Code, the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms, our Constitution, provincial Bill of Rights in Saskatchewan health legislation. You go through the whole list, and everything that they're doing in terms of mandatory vaccination is against those tenets. It's against those laws and legislation. So we fundamentally stand for freedom of choice. We believe that health is a personal decision. What you put in your body is a personal decision. And we stand 100% behind that value and those beliefs.
During COVID, has the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, notwithstanding Clause 33, been invoked?
No, it hasn't. I raised this question a number of months ago because seeing what the provincial premiers were doing and how they were, in fact, going against the Constitution. One of their ways to get around, of course, the Constitution is by invoking Section 33, the notwithstanding clause. I haven't seen it invoked by any provincial premier as of yet, but it's probably something that could be used if they wanted to do that. It would be a little bit odd, though, because if we have, let's say the PPC gets elected as the government in our country, of course, we're adamant against all of this nonsense. It would take a provincial premier to have to take a pretty large step outside of the framework that we have within the Constitution of our country to invoke Section 33. And I think the response to that by the people, regardless of what province, would be pretty immediate and pretty harsh.
Does the People's Party of Canada have a plan for getting Canada back on its feet after Trudeau's spending spree?
Yeah, 100%. The first thing, we have to absolutely denounce and reject the globalist agenda, sustainable development agenda, the Great Reset. We have to look after our country first. Now, of course, on an international stage, that doesn't mean we're not willing to work with partners that are willing to work with us. and more there is this sense of nationalism. It's a healthy nationalism. It's protecting, cultures and borders and nation states. So as that moves forward, there will be other countries, of course, that want to protect their nations and their cultures and their heritage. So we'd be willing to work with nations in that regard, and it's incredibly important that we're part of this globalization, which of course is different than globalism, and we have to make that distinction. The world is getting smaller through technology, in transportation and communication, so we want to be able to obviously compete. We have all the resources the world wants and needs, so we will and should be competing very well on the open market, and being an important partner in trade with a lot of nations that want the resources we can provide. But we have to look after Canada first. We have to look after our industries. We have to look after oil and gas. We have to get pipelines to Tidewater. We have to do the things that are necessary so we can continue to be the country that we are or have been, and regain some of that. So yeah, it deserves a lot of discussion because it is a very broad discussion in terms of globalization, how we're going to fit into this. But again, ultimately it has to be Canada first, and we have to look after Canadians first, whether it's our veterans, whether it's dealing with the opioid crisis, whether it's dealing with the economy. And we have a plan that'll get us back on our feet, and then after the 4-year term, we will have the books balanced. So, that's pretty important.
Is the economy being ignored in this election campaign?
Yeah, of course it is. Although I think there's a fairly large segment of the population that is still concerned about it, and should be, because ultimately it is about the economy. COVID had an enormous effect on our economy based on the measures that our politicians had taken. So yeah, I mean, it should be part of the discussion, most definitely. But again, without freedom, without liberty, economies will not survive. So, that it's all part and parcel.
In past interviews here, Maxime Bernier, the leader of the People's Party, is the only one who has talked about increasing the personal tax exemption before you have to start giving money to Ottawa. Everybody else is talking about how Ottawa can take more money out of your pocket to give it to somebody else. Is that something that people should be aware of?
Yeah, 100% they should. I mean, this all goes back to our core values as a party that Max brought to the party. Freedom, fairness, respect, and responsibility. And, a lot of that responsibility is on government creating an environment where the economy can flourish, where people can prosper. And instead of having the government reaching into our pocket every time we turn around, we want to get out of people's pockets. We want people to be able to, again, this sense of self-reliance, self-determination, and independence of the individual. That's incredibly important. It's essentially, Western civilization in a nutshell. So, it's definitely a huge part of this.
Are people starting to wake up to the push for totalitarianism?
Yeah, I think so, Jim. I think, it's been a long slog for me. I've been at this for about 18 years, trying to, a lot of that time is screaming into a black hole, trying to get people to listen. I think people are listening now. I think there's a lot more people that are listening, seeing what's happening and paying attention, because, their lives are being affected. Their children's lives are being affected. Their grandkids' lives are being affected. So people are paying more attention. Is it still enough? I'm not sure. I guess we'll find out at the election, but I sure hope so, because if people don't start paying attention and go to the polls with a certain level of information and intelligence, we're in really big trouble.
Are critical thinkers more likely to vote for the People's Party?
100%, absolutely. Anybody that understands what's happening in the world, understands what's happening to our country and why it's happening, the default position becomes the People's Party. This is why the whole split the vote discussion is so frustrating with conservative people that we share values with. It's very frustrating because the Conservative Party is exactly the same as the Liberal Party, and it's based on their commitment to the Sustainable Development Agenda. And for example, offshoots of that would be the Paris Accord or the Migrant Compact or, vaccine passports. They're no different than the Liberals. They come at it with a little bit of different language. They play the bait and switch and carry on. So people really need to recognize that and start to think. And once they understand, there is no other option than the People's Party of Canada.
Agenda 21 was signed onto by Brian Mulroney, and Agenda 2030 was signed onto by Stephen Harper, both Conservative Prime Ministers, and implemented by Justin Trudeau, a Liberal. Could a majority PPC government put an end to Agenda 21 and Agenda 2030 in Canada?
Yes, 100%, and you're absolutely correct. Conservatives signed it in 92. In fact, it was the Conservative that brought it into Canadian law in 2008 called the Sustainability Act, which compels Canada, a sovereign nation, quote unquote, who has to report our progress in achieving the goals of sustainable development to the UN. So, it is something that is first and foremost, in our platform. We will pull out of any agreement that is hurtful to our sovereignty as a nation. And again, that doesn't mean we're not willing to cooperate on a global basis or on a initiatives that are good for the planet, but we have to do that in the context of our nation. All of these policies, the Sustainable Development Agenda, the 17 goals, are cookie-cutter policies made for the world that have absolutely zero application in our country and really throughout a lot of the Western world. So what are we doing agreeing to this agenda that was developed by an unelected foreign entity that doesn't have our best interest? So absolutely, the PPC will get us out of that and start looking after ourselves as a nation and being self-reliant as a nation, independent as a nation, and determine what's best for us and what's best for Canadians first. And then we'll look, see where we can give a helping hand to the rest of the world.
Canada has a resource-based economy. Is this in jeopardy due to the passing of UNDRIP Bill C-15?
Yeah, that's obviously a huge element to this when we're talking about resource development. I always sort of default to a friend by the name of Ellis Ross, who has been in this arena for a long time. He's an MLA out in British Columbia. He's been a band chief. And, in his opinion, there's no more detrimental policy or agreement or law now that's more harmful to First Nations and their ability to prosper and their ability to bring opportunity to their bands and to their communities. This is obviously in the context of our nation, it's extremely concerning, that we're going to handcuff ourselves even more through this type of legislation, this globalist type of legislation. And all you have to do is look to South Africa to see how that worked out. It's, UNDRIP is a massive, agreement that has critical consequences to our sovereignty, to our prosperity, to our industry, to development, to right down to people's property, home ownership, land ownership, farm ownership. It has serious implications. So that's just one agenda. That's just one sort of policy or document on top of many others. So this is a multiple front attack on everything we cherish in this country.
Has Canada been sold out from under the people to foreign entities, and in reality, is it too late to do anything about it?
No, it's never too late. In fact, I could be sitting in a gulag exchanging cigarettes for bread, and I'd still be figuring out a way how to take our country back. But so it's never over. But it's pretty serious. We're in a pretty serious situation. We have been sold out. Every one of our establishment parties have sold out to this. And it's way past due that there's at least a party in Parliament, whether it's in government, in a majority, minority, or if it's just, an opposition, or we just have some seats that bring these issues into the forefront so Canadians understand what's happening. I tell people that I'm associated with, I tell people at rallies, I tell people on the street, just when the politicians from these parties come to your door, ask them one question. Why didn't they tell us about sustainable development? Why was it framed a conspiracy theory since well before 1992, but most definitely after 92? Why was it framed like that? Why was it anybody that brought it up was labeled as a conspiracy theorist when it was in fact happening? When this development, this sustainable development agenda, Agenda 21, now 2030, has been brought in, it's been implemented, it's been instituted, and nobody knows about it. Nobody has any awareness. Why is that? Is that not the politician's responsibility to lead from the front rather than let the media carry the narrative and then come in from behind and follow that narrative? I think our politicians are complicit and in not telling the people what's really happening and why it's happening. So they're all responsible, and people need to hold them responsible.
We'll have more with Mark Friesen right after this.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Mark Friesen. Mark, does the People's Party of Canada have internal polling that differs from the mainstream polling that keeps telling us you guys aren't in the race?
No, we don't do any internal polling. We believe in our platform. We believe in our values. We don't change those. We're very principled. So we're not guided by, what the winds are doing. We're sort of taking our own direction. So we don't do internal polling to tell us which way to go like the rest of the establishment do. We do what we do, and we educate and inform along the way. And as people come to the light and they understand what's happening, they will support what we're doing.
Should the Trudeau Foundation be investigated?
100%. And I can tell you, if I'm elected as an MP, I'll be pushing for it.
What has you concerned?
Well, again, it's transparency. It's the level of corruption. And that's one thing that the connection isn't made a lot of times, that this corruption is due to the globalist agenda. It's due to making deals with NGOs like the World Economic Forum, making deals with multinationals like SNC that contradict or contravene our laws here in our country. And they're skating on it. And there's no accountability. So, we often say within the party and when we speak to each other, fellow candidates, that, if we do get in, and let's say we get a majority or a minority, the fight then starts over by fighting within the bureaucracy, by tackling the, years upon years of this corruption being accepted and really cemented throughout the bureaucracy. So we'd have a big job ahead of us, but it's something that needs to be addressed and something that needs to be tackled. So,
does Canada need ethics laws that have some teeth to them? The Prime Minister's been found at fault twice now for violating ethics. The maximum penalty of $500 fine. About what MPs get to spend on lunch a week.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's an absolute joke. There needs to be some real accountability. There needs to be, real consequences to these things. And again, our establishment politicians are so out of touch. I mean, even Justin Trudeau, again, in his press conference the other day, admitting to tyranny, admitting essentially that he's tyrannical and basically just suggesting that we can take care of it in an election. And so nothing matters in the 4 years that we have power. We're just going to carry on and without consequence. So we have to change this. And really the people are responsible. We have to force that change. We have to force that accountability and responsibility.
Why are the police and military not standing up for the people during this push for totalitarian rule?
Well, I think, myself, coming out of law enforcement for 25 years, I know quite a few guys that are law enforcement, and they don't like the situation that they've been put in. They're sitting at least 50 to 60% in favor of people like myself and what we're representing. I stress to them how important it is to stand up and defend the oath that they took to the people of Canada to uphold the Constitution. But again, a lot of it's fear, of course. If you step outside of the trench that the media and the politicians have put us all in, you obviously expose yourself to consequences. So I think there's a lot of fear within police forces. But it's starting to shift. We just saw the Toronto Police Association absolutely refuse mandatory vaccinations. They won't do it. They won't accept it. And they have firm ground to stand on by doing that. So I think you're going to see it more and more often. We just need some leaders. We need some people to stand up within these organizations, within police associations, and lead their people to do the right thing. And whether you're police or you're just Joe Schmo citizen, people are still people, and they need people to lead. People will follow, but there has to be enough courage in some of these leaders to get their people to follow and to do the right thing and stand for what's right. So, but again, it's all based on fear and obviously there's some elements in police forces that probably shouldn't be police, and they love the amount of power and authority that they're given in these circumstances, and they relish it. But I don't think that's generally the case. I think generally speaking, they're just regular folks like you and me, put in a really bad position.
Is the People's Party getting any coverage from the mainstream media?
No, very, very little. Although I will say this morning I was granted a short interview with Global News in Saskatoon, and I took advantage of the opportunity. But yeah, on a grand scale, no, we're being completely ignored. We're not even included in a lot of their polls. We're referred to as other. It's all by design. They know that our message is right. They know that our message would resonate, and that's their worst fear. So we have to find other ways to get that message out.
Where can people follow you and find out more about your campaign?
Yeah, in regards to the campaign, they can go to markfriesen.ca. That's my campaign website. All the information is there. You can contact me from that website as well. Obviously I still have my presence online. I'm horribly throttled and shadow banned on Facebook right now, so that's being a little bit almost useless at this point. In fact, I can't even run ads from my page or my profile because they've restricted me so horribly. So Facebook is almost a dud at this point. Twitter is still pretty good. I still get good reach there. Mark Friesen 08 is my Twitter handle. And Rumble is where I'm uploading my 2-minute drills and my videos. So that's where people can find me if they want to investigate a little bit further about who I am and what I stand for.
Mark, good luck in the election.
Thanks, Jim. Much appreciated. Thanks again for the opportunity.
My guest has been Mark Friesen. You might know him as the Grizzly Patriot. He's running for the People's Party of Canada in Saskatoon. He just gave you his information, but if you want to find him on Twitter, he's at Mark Friesen 08. On Facebook at Mark Friesen PPC, if they allow him. And of course, you can also email him if you have any questions. What's the email, Mark?
Email is mark@markfriesen.ca.
Thanks again. I'm Jim
Thank
Goddard.
you.
If you have any questions for Mark or any of our other guests, you can always send them to info@howstreet.com. We'll ask that question on your behalf. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Find us on Twitter at Talk Digital Net. We're also on Facebook. I'm Jim Goddard. Thank you for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.